Hi, we're here at Rockfield Studios. We've been here most of the day, presenting our 8 hours at Rockfield live. And as you can see, we've got a fantastic audience. Guys, have you all enjoyed it today? Has it been good? Yeah. Fantastic, great. So we've got our live stream here going on now, and we've got representatives here from the Pro7ect, which is going on the rest of the week here at Rockfield, which is the songwriting retreat. We've got the manufacturers here. So we've got a representative from DPA, Sonnox, PMC, GIK Acoustics, and obviously Prism Sound. So really, what we want to do is just open this up to the floor, open this up to you who are watching live, and talk a bit about the state of the industry as it stands at the moment, how we've come out the other side of COVID, what we think the future of the music industry is going to be. So really, let's put this out to Geth there at the minute. Put him on the spot as he turned up late today.
I'm here and I'm on time.
So, Geth, how do you think the state of the industry has changed since COVID?
So I think the first thing in that question maybe is state. Maybe put it on what's the negative side of stuff at the moment, rather than like where we at with things. So obviously, state. Where do we start with? State. So let's look at like all the great things that are happening in the music industry at the moment. There's so many avenues for people to put music out. There's so many ways we can make music. There's a democracy, if you will, in terms of access to get equipment, access to get, you can make great tracks on your phone. You can make great songs on your phone, whether they're like fully produced, high fidelity, but we don't fall in love with music for high fidelity, do we? We fall in love with music because it connects to us, whether it be a great lyric or a melody. So first of all, that's a great thing, I think, with our access to technology, and also then in terms of releasing music, we don't have to have access to a label who can fund to press something and then distribute it and put it out. You can literally make a track this morning, today, and by tonight it can be out there to the world. So obviously that's a great thing. I'm sure we can all agree that's a great thing. But obviously within that there is still the way the record industry works has kind of taken a hold on that, where it's kind of access to things like playlists on streaming. You would say that is kind of representing the old model where you'd pay for a radio plugger to get you on the radio. Now we're paying people to get on on playlist pluggers. They've kind of adapted their way of working. So you could say, although we're seeing a positive there, the industry is moving slowly to try and, carry on its old way within that. But in terms of, it's great that everyone's back out touring, although obviously we've had Brexit, which is, I know there's a lot of bands that I'm working with that have really struggled. They're not household name bands. They're like out in Europe promoting their first tour, and it's been an absolute nightmare. I had a band I worked with a few weeks ago. They were supporting, they were on a support tour across Europe. They got to France with all their equipment and their carny. It was like, no, this is filled in wrong. You've got to go back. They literally had to come back over on the ferry, fill it back in, and then go back over. They missed the first show in Paris, which was the biggest show on the tour for them. Missed out on selling loads of merch. So, we have got those things happening where the profit margins are, on those type of tours are so tight as it is. And then all of a sudden it's kind of, people are like, well, we can't even go and afford to tour this at record or this at the moment. So everyone has been a lot more cautious, I guess, with what they have got when it comes to maybe budgets for records. It's like, before they'd be happy to add a zero on the end. Now it's kind of like, oh, flip, we really need to make sure every penny's accounted for. So I guess the financial implications, the positives are we've got all these great ways to create music. The negatives are the financial implications and the restrictions on people now, I would say, are maybe a lot more.
Okay, thanks for that, Geth. I've got to be honest, my oversight on this, what we should do actually, and somebody's actually requested this, and I do apologise. Can we just go along the line and let everybody introduce themselves and where they're from and what it is they do? Sorry.
I'm Phil Ross from PMC Speakers. We sell lots of high-end monitors, lots of different shapes and sizes.
Hi, I'm Indi. I'm a music producer, sound engineer based in Oxford, but I am running Project 7 this week at Rockfield.
I'm Gethin Pearson, writer, producer, mixer, and have a lot of views that I've just spoken about.
Hello, my name is David Shevin. I'm the managing director of GIK Acoustics, which is based right across the world, and we work in mainly studios, home studios, and all around.
Hi, I'm Les. I am technical support engineer for DPA Microphones. I'm also a freelance engineer working in studio and live.
Hi, I'm Giles from Sonnox Plugins. We're based in Oxford. Andy and I are here today and having a great time. Thank you for inviting us.
No problem. Absolutely, our pleasure. Obviously, I'm Jody. I'm from Prism Sound, managing director for Prism Sound. Yeah. So, has anybody else got any views on what Gethin's commented on? And obviously, if anybody wants to chip in, both on the live stream or in the room, if you've got any questions that you'd like to ask, please feel free. So, does anybody else want to comment about the state of the industry as we come out of COVID? Yeah, David.
I think it's interesting what you're saying, actually, because there's a couple of things. Obviously, as a manufacturer, we can all look at what COVID has or hasn't done, but quite honestly, I don't think it's done anything personally, but speed up what was already happening within the industry. You know, people starting to work more at home and work in different ways. That was already been happening. It's probably been happening for 15 years and a slower, and I think it accelerated. But I think there's also one of the other positives that's probably come out of it is the way that people work. And one of the things that everybody missed during that period was people. And I think this is what you've always got to get back to when we ever talk about connection. We're animals, we're people. That is ultimately the most important thing. And I think as a manufacturer of products, I could talk about ups and downs and whether things did well, what other things. But I think those trends were already happening, and some parts of it got accelerated by COVID. But I think it's really gone. At the end of the day, there were so many people we were working with, so desperate just to get 4 people back in a room, playing their instruments, being together and having that connection right the way through, right to the gigs. And I think, I don't think COVID really has done anything but accelerate. And just if I hope that it's reminded us all a little bit why we do what we do in the first place.
Definitely, yeah. I thought it was really interesting earlier how Kingsley was sort of saying that, this place was a little bit of a fluke, and kind of it just is what it is, and they got very lucky. And I kind of feel the opposite. I feel like, people come to places like this because they're such lovely people to be around, and because it's such a nice, quiet space to kind of get your head in the right game. And whether it be definitely for us, I think, our business, we can see more and more people transitioning to home. But at the same time, people are still in big studios and people still want to be in big studios. So I think it's, it's really nice to kind of see a balance, and if not, people kind of coming back into studios more as well.
That's interesting, because we've actually had a question about this. So let me just read this out. So obviously we're at a legendary venue. So do we think that technology has impacted these creative spaces, or it has evolved the way we work and what we utilize them for?
It's an interesting one. I mean, I definitely think kind of things weirdly are going full circle now. Obviously, with the age of digital recording, it's, stuff has kind of gotten so much easier to sort of play around with and, cut, paste and change. And it's kind of nice to see that people have gone full circle and, want to bounce stuff back out to tape or use tape or just go strictly tape. It's nice to kind of have a fusion of both sides, I think.
Yeah.
Hopefully this will come out right. I think that certainly being creative at home, in a home environment, is certainly one of the products of COVID. But I wonder whether the realization that the quality of that recording space and monitoring space is going to hit home at some point, and that may impact back towards the professional recording industry, where spaces have been bespoke created for a great sound and a really brilliant monitoring environment. I don't know if it's going to happen, but I wonder.
So from sort of the producer songwriter's perspective, Indi, what do you think about that?
I mean, I agree with your comment there, but because obviously during lockdown, a lot of people realized that they can do it at home because of the accessibility of equipment, and equipment is a lot cheaper now. And obviously that meant less work for us engineers or producers or whoever. But I feel like people are reaching a point where there's only so much that they can do. So then at the end of the day, they are coming back to us. They are coming back to us for remote mixing or in-person sessions and coming back to the bigger studios as well, because it's just knowledge. Like we've learned for 10, 20 years, and this just that knowledge that's missing from people that are buying cheaper equipment. Like it's incredible, like what you can get now and plugins and all of that, but it's knowledge.
But with the knowledge, do you think that it's becoming a filtered knowledge, so that people are thirsty for it, but they don't know actually where to go to get the right information, because there's so many forums and everyone's got an opinion.
And I feel like that might halt some people as well, actually, to get their foot in the door, because there is so much out there, and there's, as you say, so many forums and groups and Facebook groups and all of this and comments and things, and I think that may stop some people, but then I don't know where people then would get their knowledge from that they can actually trust, unless they know an engineer friend or whoever. But then again, everyone's got different opinions, and there's no right or wrong. It's
Yes, you keep looking at me.
I think it's a few different things to look at in terms of the reason why people come to spaces like this or somewhere. It's kind of it's not just the sonic fidelity of a place. It's like the inspiration, the things you can't, but essentially buy type of thing. Is kind of, it's like I've got like a space in West Wales, residential space, where people come and it's, my equipment list might not be like oh, we got this desk from here or this here, but it's like it's the things you can't make. It's the space and the time and the place to kind of separate themselves from like everyday life and go and create something. I guess it's like Dylan Thomas would go to a boathouse to write his poet. He had to go somewhere where he felt that I can express myself here or get away from a routine of life. So there's a lot of, and also there's that, I guess, is the comfort nature of being able to record at home a lot as well. So many people I work with, I'm like, oh, how are you getting on with new music? And they'll be like, I can't finish it, or I've kind of revised this 50 times. And like you go back, it's like, oh, let's listen to the first version. It's like, yeah, but that was the great one. It's like it's about collaboration. It's like what you said about that connection with people, about being able to, working on your own. It's kind of, it's only going to be, you're just going to kind of, it's times anew by yourself. If you're recording it yourself, it's all your own decisions. If you've written it yourself, it's all your decisions. So all of a sudden you've written this song, then you started producing it, then you started mixing it, and then you're looking at mastering it yourself. It's like no point along the way if you shared it to be like, hey, what are you thinking about this? And it's kind of being able to find people who can be a support, like a critical ear, where they're not going to say, yeah, it's like when you show something to your mum, she's like, I love it, it's the best thing you've ever done, type of thing. Or my mum just goes, yeah, that's nice, what else are you doing? So no, or it's kind of, or showing it to some people and they're going to go, just saying, oh, just tearing into it. It's kind of about having people where you can be like trusted ears and be like, yeah, okay, we love what you've done in this verse, but come on, you've got a better chorus in you than that. Or, you know what, your bass sound isn't great here. So it's, there's certain things obviously you can like buy for your home environment, like acoustics, like great microphones, great plugins to get there. But some of the things you can't buy is why you go to places or why you collaborate. It's kind of like, that's the main thing, is being able to find people who can be trusted ears. And I think at the moment there's a real gap where there's so much technical information out there and support you can get, but in terms of like creative support, obviously, if you haven't got an A&R, if you haven't got a manager, if you haven't got collaborators in a team, there's no one there to go, look, you've got better in you, or to pat you on the back and go, no, see this one through. It's kind of, don't give up because you haven't got the snare right in the mix. It's kind of, no one's buying this because of the snare sound. They're buying it because it's a great song, type of thing, or not even, but giving their time to you, listening to it, or getting inspired to come and see a show, or buy a shirt, or buy a record. It's kind of, so I think it's that balance of like, obviously technical proficiency, but having a team that people around you, critical ears, but you can trust to help get the best out of you creatively as well.
And I think what's interesting about that is there's been a lot of criticism going around that people have heard where bigger, maybe established people have accusing other artists, example, of not writing their own stuff and collaborating.
Yeah.
But I mean, for me, I just don't even understand. I mean, some of these people are making the criticism of in bands.
Yeah.
I mean, if that isn't the initial collaboration that anyone has, and it seems to be a current trend, doesn't it, to almost put people down, saying that if you didn't write a song entirely by yourself without any input from anyone else, that you're not a
Well,
real artist.
It's kind of like focusing on the wrong thing there, isn't it? Because it's like, you know, you listen to like Michael Jackson songs, he had co-writers on them. You know, maybe the wrong example.
Lose
From
Liam Gallagher here.
Yeah, oh yeah,
He
whoever.
co-writes.
It's kind of it's not like they're trying to hoodwink the world and saying, oh, I've written all this and had ghostwriters. It's kind of they're open and honest about it. So there's no embarrassment about it. So you look across, you know, Prince, yeah, he wrote the songs, but he had like musicians in his house living there being like, I need you to play this, I need you to play this. Of course, he played a lot of it himself, but he also had an engineer who he trusted and worked with and, you know, mixed with as well. So he had a team, although it would be like written by Prince. It's like, yeah, but it wasn't just him in the room on his own all the time. He had other people around and inspire him. Somebody would start programming a beat and he'd be like, keep playing that, like record it and then write something. So it's about that thing of like it's like what you went back to earlier, human interaction. Music comes from tribes. Like we are tribal people. We need people type of thing. And, you know, it's kind of like, and music is like the bed for that, really. It's, you know, it's like it was there before language. So yeah.
But you talk about tribal people, but do you find that the industry has become much more fragmented because of the change in structure and the introduction of streaming and people doing it independently? And I'm not advocating for one or the other, but you know, you used to have a very much more structured approach where you'd get signed to a record label, you'd have an A&R team, they'd go, oh, you can work with this guy, and you know, this will be a licensing thing with this company, and you know, we're going to get this collaborator to work with you, and blah 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 blah. And now it's almost like people are going, well, I'm out here on my own and I don't really know how to do this bit of the industry or that bit of the industry. And it might be marketing, it might be the creative process, it might be distribution, it might be whatever. And they're trying to do it on their own. And actually, it's a bit of an uphill struggle for them. To anybody?
I mean, I just feel like everything is so much. I don't know if I'm going to answer your question, but everything is just so much more accessible. Like marketing, social media, anyone can put anything out there. YouTube, anyone can put anything out there. But then that's a great thing. But then algorithms, everything, they're all changing. Instagram's changing. It's now not photos. TikTok is blowing up. Like all marketing is, well, not all marketing. Marketing
the revenue streams changing kind of thing. Yeah,
through TikTok and stuff. And then it's so saturated as well, though. Yeah.
And that's the thing is you know, we are getting saturated and we've got constant content. And I hate to say this, but how do we feel about the devaluation of our product? Because at the end of the day, the creative process, what comes out at the end of it is a product. And I hate to say it, but we've got to, well, no, I don't hate to say it. We've got to monetize it somehow because everybody needs an income. So, you know, do we think that's getting devalued?
Yes and no, because that's just how it is now. Like it has to be monetized, but that's just the way it is now, isn't it? It's just you have to go with it, don't you?
I think for me, like a lot of stuff kind of comes back to education, like especially for sort of PMC as a business. I would say it's like making sure that people are making, like we're not making the decision for someone, and we believe something is right for a certain reason. So we try to educate people in the way that we think, and maybe that's not right for everybody, but you know, we're sort of saying, can you see this? Why this is why we do this? And I kind of feel like that's, you know, it's helpful to get someone to make a decision or understand why our thought processes should be aligned, or you know, or if so, why someone else's is different. I think.
Well, that's an interesting thing, and I'd like to kind of open this up to the floor if anybody's willing to sort of take part. Is that, do you think that the kind of things that we've put on today, you know, where, you know, we're a group of manufacturers, we're not, you know, and producers and engineers and independents, you know, we're not trying to, you know, say, oh, you must do this or you must do that. We're trying to give you the information to make an informed decision. Do you feel that that's, you know, what you've got out today, and you can go away with the information that we've all provided you so that you can make an informed decision? Because, you know, you can go on a training course at a university, or you could come to a one-day event like this. Do you think more stuff like this would be beneficial to our industry as a whole? Yeah.
I think really one of the things, particularly for myself, as an older person getting back into the industry post-parenthood, there's actually events like this, the networking, just meeting people, talking to people, you know, some of the ideas, you know, one gentleman earlier I was chatting to, you know, it's got my card because I do some private teaching, which isn't where I want the core of my business to be, but it's what I need to do to keep paying the bills. But just like getting these things together, meeting people, I think is that kind of the key thing, that even through a late university degree that I struggled with, and now post COVID, when we're all just being to get together again, you know, it's even more important because it's going to make the connections that can help us develop the industry.
Phil, you got any comments on that?
I mean, I think it's like it's all the same thing, really. It's all about networking. Like, you know, I mean, kind of going back to looking at my career path. If it wasn't for some people, that I wouldn't have the job that I'm in today. And it's not necessarily that I went down a certain path. It's more you meet certain people along the way that help you move your road, kind of thing, if you get what I mean, in a weird way. Not what you know, so you know.
I think it's always been that way, hasn't it? Okay, sort of from the manufacturer's point of view, do you guys think that, and I know David kind of touched on this, you know, a little bit, do you think it's made us become more innovative and look at the way we develop products in a more dynamic way? You're ready for this one, aren't you?
So I'm not ready at all. It's a very big question. Do you want me to make specific mention of lockdown, or is it a more general question about where we're now?
However you feel.
I think from a software manufacturer's perspective, number one, the obvious thing to say is that it's a much more crowded space than it has ever been. And I'm sure many people before me have said that, you know, there are EQs, there are compressors, there's a massive fashion right now for modeling older technology. And I think that's fantastic. It sounds wonderful. But I think, sort of chiming with your question, isn't it kind of incumbent on software manufacturers to imagine and to think of something new? And that is a massive challenge to rise to at any point, you know, post-COVID. But I think it's a challenge that increasingly software manufacturers will have to rise to. And the reason is that there is a finite number of 1960s hardware processes that can be modeled. So I think the sort of the short summation would be, I think it's really important that we use our imagination perhaps more than we have in the past.
Does anybody else want to? Yeah.
Agreed as well on that note. I don't really want to necessarily speak for a manufacturer. I'm an engineer who likes microphones. I'm here representing a manufacturer, but I don't really know sort of what their sort of ideas are for the future as such. I don't have that sort of insight into the company. But in terms of how things are always done, you know, things tend to get done because that's the way they were always done. And I think there is a responsibility to try and push the envelope and to try and continue innovating. From a microphone perspective, you know, the cheapest way to improve your sound quality is to get a better microphone, whatever that might be. And a better microphone doesn't have to be the best; it just needs to be better than what you have already. You know, speaker manufacturers have innovated to the point that they're at the moment. Software is moving ahead, but that doesn't mean any of us should you know, stop in that process. I think it's a responsibility to continuously push the envelope and find better, more efficient ways of doing what we've always done. And that might be drawing on the past. It also might be finding completely new ways of doing what we do.
And I think the other thing you got to look at as well, especially in more recent times, we've got so many more avenues now to talk to our customers than we have ever had before. And I think that's so important because, you know, it was at one time a bit more difficult. So when we talk about innovation, I don't think, you know, we'll look at innovation necessarily, you know, to anything to do with COVID. Again, we've been working towards products that are going to be suitable in smaller rooms perhaps than we would have done in the past. But again, that's been a process. But what we are able to do so much more now is talk to people. And that's just not networking in person, but on every single different type of platform. And what that does is, you know, I mean, it kind of if you start listening to what people are talking about and listening, that's where innovation comes from. Innovation isn't just me sat here as a manufacturer thinking, what clever idea can I come up with next? Innovation is created by people talking and networking and just going, oh, actually there's a need here. There's something we haven't thought of. There's something, let's see what we can do to fulfill that need. So I think, one of the things that I like so much about, what's happened in the last few years is that accessibility in so many different ways. And it isn't just forums. I know it's easy to pick on forums because you're always going to get somebody on there who's got some completely set wacky ideas, but there's loads of the ways that people interact all the time, whether it's on Skype, whether that we're talking actually in person. There's so many different ways, and so many different ways to get feedback from people and start to really look at what is the future, because the future isn't what we decide, is it? It's the future is what people want and need. And I think listening and that's just the best, the best thing that's come out in recent things. And I think people are taking that time to realize that manufacturers aren't just the gods in the way that we're just someone else sat in our little home office in exactly the same way, in the same situation as they were. And I think that's one of the best ways that innovation will ever come through now.
Anyone got any comments?
I think. Well, I was just going to say, I think for us, kind of like bringing it back round on the technology front. Most people are living in smaller spaces these days, and it's kind of always our challenge to make something even smaller sound even bigger. And I think it's it's miniaturizing the technologies and getting stuff to sound even better, whether that be with newer chips or different technologies or anything like that. It's just kind of always like we've always been a company to try and push the bounds a bit more of speaker design rather than just sort of sit and punch out the same thing, which is a slightly bigger box or a slightly different box. But I think mainly for us it's making sure that we can miniaturize the technologies even more so that something is so big for rooms as everybody's rooms are getting smaller, I think.
So with that in mind, we talk about innovation and we talk about sort of the next generation and collaboration and moving forward, and I'm going to put each one of you on the spot now, and I think we go along the line. In the last sort of 12, 18 months, what's the most innovative thing, or actually, let me phrase this slightly differently. What's the most innovative thing that you've seen that you think is going to change the industry, or what's the thing that you think is going to change the industry in the forthcoming years?
It's that's an interesting one. I mean, because sort of the biggest one I would probably say at the moment, which is going around everywhere, is obviously Dolby Atmos. Like Dolby Atmos is such a big thing, and I think certain platforms are really pushing it forwards. It's always interesting when you sort of look at kind of the crux of how stereo has been so strong, and even with the days of like Quad or 5.1, how they sort of came around and went back again. And it definitely feels like Dolby Atmos is relatively here to stay, shall we say? So I think in terms of like just something that's new, that's going to be around and is currently very fluidly changing all the time, I would probably say Dolby Atmos is the number one on my list. How about anybody else?
That's what I was going to say.
Sorry.
Dolby. No, oh goodness me.
I think we should throw this out to the floor after we've done us as well.
No, I think just from experience over the last year, for me anyway, just in my little studio, is just remote stuff, remote mixing, remote recording, and just seeing where that goes really, and just the improvements in how like the quality of remote mixing and recording now is just incredible.
Do you find kind of like any of your workflows changed, or like have you bought anything different, or would you buy anything different?
I don't know yet, because the work isn't taking over my other stuff at the minute. But obviously, over the last year or so, I have adapted a lot of my work to remote mixing, whether that's buying bits of software to enable that, and then obviously platforms to upload, just like admin stuff. But it's what we all need to know. It's the best platforms to do that, really.
So yeah, I guess there's a few again along the steps of there's first the creation of stuff. There's a lot of incredible new things there, and also as artists themselves becoming more upskilled and kind of taking more of the reins themselves. So again, like having a lot of stuff sent to me, or people becoming like, oh, we've got this far with it, can you help us finish it? So that's a kind of that has definitely that's advanced quite a lot. But then there's the technological side in terms of I've just built a new studio and then looking at ways to make it sound the best. So it's kind of, again, innovation with acoustic designers, and then like, you know, you've got all the different or name different speaker brands, but you know, all the way now they've got DSPs and also like talking to people who like I work with like on amp side, kind of how they're adapting their practices. Kind of not everyone's got huge live rooms or spaces where to get huge guitar tones from, so they're adapting their products with like built-in IRs, or even you've got great, you know, plug-in versions of that as well. So but just the advancements of tools. But then I think once the music's created, then so we got, you know, the creation of it, the putting it together, and then the actual, once it goes out into the world, I really hope there's an advancement. And there's a lot of lobbying at the moment to play people like Spotify, so people can get paid for what they do. It's kind of, we all love music and we want people to keep creating music, but it's kind of like no one can make it their full-time thing because of the way they're paid. So, you know, it's kind of us as the audience making, you know, decisions based on like, oh, I've only got so much money to spend on music this month. Where am I going to put that? Am I going to put it to this company who don't pay the artist? Am I going to put it to this company who do? Or am I going to buy direct from the artist? It's like, I think as consumers and music lovers as well, we've got a responsibility to change things as well. So, yeah.
Yeah, and going on from that, I think really there's a constant industry development. And one of the things I've talked about today when I've done my sessions is about the fact that we can sit there now and in seconds I can tell what's going on in that room. 3-4 years ago, it hardly ever happened at all. I mean, and it's just come now that, say, 1 in 3. So, you know, I mean, you know, for myself, I've got the you know, the speaker manufacturers, the microphone manufacturers to thank, because their technology is bringing the whole industry into a whole different level. So, yeah, physics of acoustics perhaps isn't going to drastically change in terms of that reasons, but our understanding of how sound works in a room and how all the different scenarios we're now faced with. Imagine, you know, a lot of it was theoretical 20 years ago. Now I can sit there and I can literally look exactly what happens with a pair of PMC speakers with certain microphones in anybody's room around the world, and I've got that information right in front of me with some photographs. So actually, as the industry develops all the way, it pushes us all to use that technology. It pushes us all to come into a different looking at a different way, and actually improves it all for everybody.
I'd say immersive audio in general, so Dolby Atmos, and in the live environment, stuff like Acoustics, Lisa, and DPA Soundscape. I think these are areas that are still quite confused in the way that people are using them. There's a standardized technology behind how they're meant to be used or how they're meant to be deployed, but I think creatively, I think we're still in a bit of no man's land in terms of artists getting to the point where they understand the limitations or exactly what's possible and start creating for these environments, rather than music being created in the way that it is now and then trying to be sort of repurposed into those things. So I think it's I don't think it's there yet, and hopefully it will become a much more exciting and much more interesting environment. I'm more excited about the live environment because the traditional idea of seeing a concert is so sort of ingrained in all of us. So how that develops and how that changes with more immersive setups in venues and stuff like that is going to be really interesting.
Okay, a statement followed by a possibly controversial opinion. Andy can kick me for. So statement, what do I feel is driving innovation? What's changing the most in the last few years of software? AI, machine learning, black box styled stuff. The statement, the controversial opinion is to follow. It's really helpful to have processes when you're in a creative mindset that don't distract. But I'd like to offer an opinion on that, which is that, is it possible that those processes, in insulating us from what they do, don't let us know what's happening and tell us about the decisions that are being made on our behalf by this technology? And so the thought I would like to
just gone very deep.
My last statement before I do something different for a living, I'm sure. P45 on the way. We do feel that there is an opportunity that may be being lost as a consequence of that stuff being done magically in the background. That was the controversial bit.
Okay, got a question?
Do you feel potentially that things might be getting too accessible? That it kind of removes that requirement for someone to have the level of training in the field, because anyone can get to there now through the use of these.
I think it's a
Sorry,
question.
can I? Because I know we just I've just seen the live stream. Can you just repeat your question? Because they are having problems hearing.
Sorry. Hello. Do you feel that potentially things are possibly too accessible now, where we have so much assistance from AI that it removes the requirement for someone to actually have that baseline level of knowledge and ability within the field?
I wish I could give you a simple answer, but the truth is that some people want to learn more about their craft and others don't want to be distracted. I don't think there's a rule or a simple statement that can fit all in that respect. It's a great question.
Thank you. Thank you.
While I'm standing, have we got any other questions that anybody would like to ask? Yeah.
Hi there. So with the DSP is getting really good, programs getting really good. We've got great plugins now, and it is, in the right hands, you've got the tools to make studio quality recordings in small spaces, and people will spend hours and hours and hours crafting this. How does everyone feel about the fact that the end user often is going to be listening on a low bitrate stream on a bus through a tinny little speaker on the phone, and how much does that devalue all the blood, sweat and tears that you've put into creating your craft?
Do you want to go first?
As a fellow bus user, it makes me feel annoyed. But,
Yeah. Well, it is. We make jokes about it, and it's kind of like, you spend ages getting this great sound. You're like, well, people are going to hear it through a speaker anyway. But what we do is, the first thing we do, we reference it through a speaker, because that's what people are going to listen to it from. It's like, if the rules are if the game's changing, you don't go, well, they didn't used to listen to it on this. It's kind of like you go, well, I want to make the best thing that can come through that speaker. It's kind of, you can't be a Luddite and say, well, no, I'm gonna still do it on people who can only afford 10 grand stereos type of thing. It's kind of, you'll hear more in that. It's kind of, if you want to see art, a beautiful painting, you go and see it, but you can still look at it on a computer screen and appreciate it for how it's there. But if you want the full experience, you go. It's the same as cinema, I guess. People are watching films on their phone, but Marvel is still spending millions and billions of pounds on making them, so it's kind of, I think it's that thing of, right, if that's how people are listening to it, so we'll reference a little Bluetooth speaker, we'll listen a phone, we'll listen to big speakers, we'll listen on DAB radios. It's like, it's not that we change the art for that, but it's a consideration.
I suppose you've got to detach yourself. I suppose you've got to detach yourself from that a little bit. Then it's like, okay, I want to make this best I can, but the reality is, how far do you go? With tweaking and everything else, and how much you spend, the laws of diminishing returns.
Yeah. I think what you said, like the key part of that is reference.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what is reference? Reference is as high as you can possibly get.
Yeah.
And I kind of feel like that's the key part of whether someone is listening on a pair of Apple AirPods or whether someone is listening on their small hi-fi or an 80s boombox. What you want to give them is the experience of sonically as best as it can be, and no matter what format that is on, as long as you're referencing at the right level and the right quality, all of those should translate.
And I guess it's what you're making decisions about. It's like, ultimately, like, my job, again, I'll talk about, like, this technical proficiency, but my job isn't to make, you always, the rule is like, I want it to move someone as a song, as a piece of art. All the other stuff adds up to that and can make that better, can add like percentage of value. But ultimately, it's like, I don't go back to records that I grew up listening to as a teenager because they were the most hot, some of the 7-inches, it's like, I listen to them now and go, oh my gosh, like, I used to, this is terrible, he's sounding, but it still makes me feel like I did then. And it's like, all the bands I would go and see in like little clubs and get records and T-shirts and, luckily didn't get tattoos of type of thing. It wasn't because of the sonic fidelity of it type of thing. And of course, it's like now I still strive for that, but ultimately what I'm trying to get across is a feeling and emotion type of thing.
can a certain amount of that be looked at in the mastering process? I mean, mastering now caters for vinyl release for different platforms release. How far do you think mastering needs to go to cater for these different?
Yes, really
low
well.
fidelity?
It's like, so I work with a few different types of mastering engineers. It's kind of like this, and yeah, they master for, you know, you'll be like, oh, how many different versions do you want? Do you want a vinyl version? Do you want an Apple Music version? Do you want this version? I'm like, let's just deal with the one version first.
Yeah.
So, you know, as in like, if this was, you know, if I'm going to hear one version that people are going to hear, let's hear back. So, you know, you don't want millions of different versions of ones. You know, it's kind of like, I guess it's like, well, let's repaint this like Mona Lisa because the lighting might change in this place or this place, it's this place type of thing, you know. It's again, then all of a sudden you're making artistic decisions, which is what I think my role is, based on where, you know, kind of all these different
Your
formats
surroundings kind of thing,
yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
With regards to mastering,
Yeah.
how do you all feel about loudness units and how loud things should be these days?
I mean, I think it just comes down to what you're trying to achieve. You know, I mean, not everything has to be loud. I mean, at this day and age, it's, you know, it's very much seen like anything on the radio has to be loud. It has to be ridiculous. And in reality, it doesn't. And kind of like, in a way, kind of Dolby Atmos has sort of shown that a little bit as well, where all of a sudden you're gaining, you know, so much extra space and depth that like records don't sound as slammed as they did before. Like even, you know, even the stuff that's being remixed in Atmos, just, it's kind of like, it's interesting what you say about mastering as well, because it's sort of like you spread everything out and the picture has gotten huge. You need a bit of glue to glue all of that back together. And you know, everyone's kind of making sort of decisions on a whim at the moment because they're not sure how the format is. It's like when stereo came out and it was like, whoa, we've got 2 speakers. I can make someone walk from here to here. Like, you know, and all of a sudden they can walk all the way around you. And I think it's just finding more space and you know, some people might find some really amazing stuff that's now becomes loud or newer as well. So yeah, the loudness was always an interesting one.
Interesting comment on that. Do you think that, because we've all sort of at one point or another touched on the Dolby Atmos situation, and obviously you've got the spatial audio with Apple, etc. Do you think this whole, because in response to you, I think there is a slight move away from this whole loudness war now, because people are actually, I know this sounds bizarre considering we're in a room full of audio engineers and songwriters and stuff, but listening to music again, and they're actually hearing it and going, this is an experience again, and actually I don't need it to be slammed at full level into my head, you know. I want the experience now. Do you think that's part of it?
I think, I mean, like, it's, you know, it's sort of one of those things of kind of popular culture where, like, you know, everything has got to be right out and in your face, and it's kind of nice to strip back from that. I mean, do I think it will creep back forwards? Probably in the future. But, you know, it's nice to just have something different for a while to kind of get your teeth into and for people to experiment with.
And I think one of the things, because obviously we're at Rockfield, we've been mainly focusing here entirely on making the music, but a lot of these technologies, this isn't the only thing obviously that they're used for. And Dolby Atmos obviously is the prime example of that, because all the initial demos were always going to be something that was more likely to be with film and television, which is also one of the first places where they had that situation where they were producing sound for about 120 different formats, and you know, now to the extent that you can buy a couple of £1 million desk and it sort of resets it up for every different thing. So I think, you know, we're looking only purely here at music, but I mean, we do quite a lot of work as well, for example, with software companies and gaming companies. And I think, you know, we're talking about the innovation, what's going to happen in the future. The gaming industry, I think, are going to gain even more influence, especially with the age of people as who got into gaming and as the people who are innovative in that field. And I think it's sort of it's an area that's missed because it's using all of the different things. It's using all the things that television uses. It's using everything that the music uses. I mean, they're literally their own little industries that they're doing every single aspect, you know, right, recording their own music, recording their own sound effects, right down to the extent I was telling people earlier where, you know, you'll go to someone like Imperium Games and, you know, like they used to sit there, someone making a horse sound with, you know, a couple of, now they're using sound libraries and they want a particular sound and they're sitting there for hours and hours just to get one sound. And I think these other, you know, all of the things we're talking about is all pro audio industry. It's not just about music. And I think the whole of it all, that collaborative experience that we want at home. We want Netflix and we want all the games.
Yeah.
It's, literally PlayStation now is like Netflix, isn't it? You just go on and you stream the game, and we want all of that experience. And I think people are going to want it even more. And I think it's really exciting, actually, how that'll actually feed back into the music industry as well, and how we all actually, use and appreciate all these different types of formats and innovations being put in place.
Anybody else want to comment? Because I think we've got a question from online. So if you could pass the mic over to Yvette.
Thank you. One question come through. It kind of refers back to the events and everyone kind of getting together and stuff. So I think this should go down the line. What network and conference events does everyone recommend as your favourites worldwide for emerging and professional producers and engineers, especially to meet and learn from manufacturers as well as the pro audio professionals?
Oh, that's easy to answer. 8 hours at Rockfield. I think it's a tough. For me, it's a tough one because I'm lucky enough that I get to experience a lot of different diverse events. We've just recently had NAMM, which is a fabulous networking event. We've got AES coming up. NAMM's the US based. We've had AES in Europe. We've got the AES in New York. There's Gear Fest that's just happened. I think they all have their own merits. I think there's a lot of brilliant forums as well. That have evolved. Hey Audio Student for people from the educational community is a great forum. So I think really it's not about whether one's better, in my opinion anyway, one's better than another. I think they all have their relevance, and I think they are at different target markets, and they are also at different stages in your career path. So I think explore as many and every one that you possibly can.
I don't really have a great deal to add to that, other than a couple of personal favorites. One is Mix with the Masters, and the other is a Facebook group called Control Room.
I am the world's worst networker, and I don't have any social media. I still
don't know who you are.
So I'm probably not best to answer this. I also hate trade shows. Generally, groups of people in general, apart from you lot, and 8 hours of but I guess
about your marketing manager application.
But I guess what in that sense, I'm kind of an extreme example of getting work. It's just surprising that I still have some. What I've done, the way I've done approached my career is just finding the things that I like and being passionate about those things, and that's opened doors, and it's led me to meet people that share my values and my interests, and it's a lot easier to network with people that you like and like you, rather than than sort of trying to get into a room and sort of have a personality. So
Well, from our point of view, I mean, we're a little bit like Prism Sound, as in we obviously, as manufacturers, we're trying to cover more than one base. So there's so many different events to go through. So I think the key with this, I think all the way along, is finding your own interests, your own passion, and going to those events. As every single country, for different aspects and different parts of your career have different trade shows that have different events, and it is trying to get along to them, and I think it's that thing as well. We talk about networking, but networking really is an important thing, and it's when you're being there, not being scared, go and introduce yourself. You never know who you might meet, you never know who you might chat to, and it might, like you say, open doors that you didn't even know was there to be opened.
Foreign, obviously all you're saying is so many great forums out there, so many great places to meet people, but it's interesting, like kind of what you were saying really about the multimedia way things are now. It's kind of like, I guess my advice on that in terms of, in context of your question, would be go places where there's not, where you wouldn't expect to be. It's like, if you go to a gaming place as a producer, you're going to have more chance of setting up connections to offer something that other people don't have, because everyone's there to talk about gaming. It's like, go is like, oh, look, if you're looking for an engineer, I'd love to work with you. Let's try something out. Trying to find innovative ways or different places to go and offer what your services are. Because if you go into a producer event or a music event, most people are offering a similar thing to you, I guess, type of thing. So go and put yourself in places where you might not be expected to offer what you've got.
You've really all covered all the bases here. No, I think just from personal experience, it's just, again, as everyone said, just chatting to people, and you literally never know who you're talking to. I've got all my work just through even my lecturers, and I wouldn't be doing Project 7 if it wasn't for my lecturers at uni and just through them mentioning me to other people. And I think I feel like I need to bring up Project 7 here. Things like Project 7 and us running masterclasses, not just for songwriters, but for music producers as well. And we did a whole interview series during lockdown and things from all our headline producers. And I think it's just watching videos like that. If massive networking events aren't your thing, in massive crowds of people, there are so many other ways, and so many different ways to contact people as well through social media and all of that.
I think for us it's kind of more just really recommendation and word of mouth. It's always, I'll speak to Jody and Jody will say, oh, we've got this project on, and it's oh, okay, interesting. We know that person, or we don't know that person, or it's all about making those relationships and just getting out in front of people and talking to people and seeing what they're interested in and what they do, rather than just trying to sell someone something. Actually, just being interested in what other people do is, I think, probably the strongest trait, I'd say.
I think the thing about it is, and we've all been in this boat, is that we've all started our careers and we've all started in this industry and we've all been doing it a long time. And it is daunting. But once you're in it and you realize how small our industry is, and the fact that you can pretty much get to know everybody, or somebody who knows somebody, it's actually a really friendly industry. And, the forum thing, it's almost like... The only analogy I can give is like being an actor is you've got to kiss a lot of frogs to get to the right people. But it's a great, in my opinion, it's a great industry to be in. Otherwise, I don't think I'd have stayed in it. But you've just got to do everything you can to find the right people, talk to the right people, and you are going to get kickbacks and pushback sometimes. But that's part of the job.
But I just feel like there's so many avenues that everyone can go down as well. I know we're sat in Rockfield Studio, but if you want to be an engineer and you want to be a people person, maybe live sound is more your thing. And there's so many forums of,
and you don't know it until you try.
No,
it.
exactly. You just gotta try it. From personal experience, I've got a studio, but I do a lot of theatre as well. And obviously I get a lot of connections through theatre, but then that took me to sound design. And it's you just don't know where one thing is going to take you. So I think just say yes to everything.
Say yes to everything.
Yeah.
So we've only got a couple of minutes left. Has anybody got any questions? Any more questions?
I had a burning question. I don't know how to phrase it, but you've talked about progress and the boundaries you're pushing, applying to fidelity, for want of a better word, and the sound capture, the sound delivery, but then also the creatives who are making it all and pumping it out from their bedrooms. But is there a limit? I mean, is there a limit to creativity? Is there a limit to the sound capture? Let's call it that. And is it now just a matter of getting the right people and enabling the creatives to do it properly and professionally in some way? Or are we getting to a peak creativity?
I suppose it depends who you ask on this one. I would probably say for us, it's we always feel like there's more to be had, with anything that we do. And I don't know if that's just because we're such or definitely that the engineers are such perfectionists, where it's there is always more. If I would have had one more day or 10 more days, but there's always a line where you've got to go, do you know what, guys, it's finished. We've got to monetize some of it now, exactly as we were coming back earlier. Yeah, and it's exactly the same with the creative process.
It just completely depends what art you're creating. Some engineers, purely engineers, they might not have a musical bone in their body, so they are purely technical, and that's all they're focused on. They're focused on the snare sound. Whereas if, as we were saying earlier about the art of the music, you can put out whatever you want. I don't think there's any limit to how it should be, really.
And I think as manufacturers, it's part of our job to help in that creation as well. It's not just about how technical we can be, it's about how we can help the people using our products to be more creative. And I think we always keep that in mind as well. How can we inspire other people? And I think we'll stop when the imagination stops, because it's just, there's always going to be something else. Someone else is going to come up with something, like I was saying, well, that's a great idea, and then someone else use it and bounce it off. And I think hopefully it'll go on for a long time, but at the end of it, if it's music, it's still going to be songs, and it's still going to be that creative process at the end of the day.
It's interesting when you say peak creativity, though, because it's kind of like, I think the pressure on artists now to not be just great artists, but they've got to be video directors. They've got to be an online presenter on TikTok. It's like, I'll literally be in the middle of vocal takes with an artist, and a manager will be going, "You haven't posted any content today." It's like, this should be the only thing that matters. It's like, none of that matters if the music isn't great. It's kind of, so I think it's I think we have reached peak content where, like, in a where it's like, what more can people be doing type of thing. It's like, let them do one thing well, rather than try and be mediocre at all these different things just to be an internet personality.
And I think one of the things about that is we're throughout history, throughout musical creation, you've had your pioneers and you've had your formulaic structure. And I think we're always going to have that. And the formulaic structure is always going to sell, and your pioneers are always going to sell. And that's where the creativity, and that's where the relationship between those creatives and us as manufacturers comes in, is that actually we do want to continue pushing those boundaries. And I think I probably speak for all of us, is if we aren't pushing those boundaries, and I think it's from, both the production side and the technology side, it's time for us to retire.
Because where's the fun gone?
Yeah, exactly.
We're not pushing the boundaries. Even as manufacturers, you may not think it's as creative, but it's still a creative industry. We're creating something different, and we're helping to continue in that creative. And if we're not coming up with something new, we're not excited. We may as well not be there.
Well, it's from the motivation point, isn't it? It's like, none of us, personally, it's not like, well, I'm going to get into this so I can make loads of money. It's like, there's a lot of other ways to make money, but that's not my motivation with it. It's like, I just want to be able to do something I love every day, create. It's like, you want to be able to make rooms sound better and push ways to do that, make the transmission of sound better, make better microphones, but
I'm still absolutely thrilled to bits when I see and hear records that I know has been created in a room that I've helped create. I mean, I still don't ever get bored of seeing that you created something brilliant. I'm like, I feel in a little way that I've helped that.
And likewise, every time you get a record show up, there's like, that you've been part of creating, it's still like a kid, like, oh my gosh, it's like saving up your money to buy that record, and then all of a sudden it's like, wow, my name's in there as well. Incredible, that's the joy in it. Yeah.
So I think we've hit a nerve with people, because we've got some questions as well online. So
it's actually not a comment. It was a nice one to kind of lead out on. So Chris Myring from Leicester, he would have loved to have been here for the actual event, but this kind of says it already. He's too busy doing his productions, and in work to take a day out, but he's been using his Prism interface. So all good.
Thanks, Chris, for taking the time to watch. And I'll give you the £100 later. Okay, well, we are out of time, but thanks ever so much for attending today. I hope you all enjoyed it. Thanks for watching online. Stay safe in the heat. Have a safe journey home. And thanks for everybody on the panel. And hopefully we'll see you all again next year. Thanks very much. Goodbye.